Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Skylar Madison, and welcome to the Orphanlast experience. Although I thought I was done with this background last week, I've decided I need to do a few more refinements. Now, the joints to the tile, I decided and this isn't inside of the video itself. For some reason I did that outside of a recording. But I decided to copy the line work onto another layer, and I adjusted the size and position of one of those basically the copy of the tile layer. Then I went ahead and transformed this copy basically to basically be ever so slightly smaller, and then inverted the colors to the layer to the right, basically the one that happened to have all the line work to the right of every single joint of the tile work. This way I had some joint spacing. You can actually see the joint and not just some symbolic line to represent it. It also created a really interesting dynamic where it made everything look kind of beveled. I also noticed that there was an ever so slight repeating texture that I applied to the floor. Like the texture itself, it would repeat itself a little bit too much, and it just didn't quite fit reality. So I selected the floor and found the layer that happened to have the texture that I applied to the floor. And once it was selected, I went ahead and used the Smudge Rake 2 brush on it, and just kind of kept brushing towards both the east and west vanishing points, and that created a really nice look to it. Now, throughout this recording, you may see me doing a lot more than what I'm actually describing, and some of the reason for that is because I just simply made this image really weird, just because I don't have much experience making digital painting and much experience actually working with color. I've been doing a lot of research on how to improve in this area, and I'm looking forward to sharing my findings, and some of the findings are actually in the video you're watching right now. In the plus intersections of the closest joints in the tile work, I erased some of the weird lines to add a tiny bit of realism to the piece. Some of my lines for the tile also needed refinement, so I went ahead and erased a little bit of those. Krita also has a clone brush, and I used it to further fix the joints. Basically, when they were just a solid black line, they looked fine, but now that you can see an actual joint and the spacing of the joint, I thought it best to close the gap on some of them. One of the problems with the way that I colored this image is that I kept applying blending modes to a bunch of different layers, but you don't necessarily have to do this. But if you do this when you're just applying all these blending modes to variously different layers, just expect there to be all sorts of problems if you want to try to simplify the image, such as if you want to start like merging variously different layers. It'll look different after you merge them. And so you can actually use a blending mode and have it applied to the brush and not the layer. I also never felt like I got the metal rectangular door kickers looking right. They never looked like convincing metal. So I selected around the door kickers. Filled the selection with a super dark blue.
And on a separate layer, I set my brush itself to color dodge, which is found under the lighten category, and used what I thought was a nice scratchy looking brush. I also set the color to a mid-gray bluish color with my brush at 10% opacity. Just brushing over it again and again brought the door kickers to a nice metallic look. I then made the brush size rather small, ramped up the opacity to 100%, and drew in a bunch of scratches to its surface. I never liked the windows, so I used the smudge block tilt brush on them. I then selected all the layers, duplicated them, and then merged all the duplicates into one layer. I went to Filter, Adjust, Desaturate to turn it all into a black and white image. And I then lowered the opacity of this layer down to 50%. I set my brush itself to color dodge and set the opacity of my brush down to 50% and started to draw all the light back into the scene. I then made my grid to help me as a guide for when I'd eventually put it into OpenTunes. I actually regret not doing this at the very beginning, but we live, we learn, and we do better next time. That pretty much concludes it for this video, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. If you liked this video, if you found it informative, if you enjoyed the content, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you didn't like any of this stuff, please like, share, and subscribe anyways.